spreading the word about the importance of general aviation and how sustainability has become a key part of those conversations. From the National Business Aviation Association, this is Flight Plan. I'm Rob Finfrock with your trusted source for business aviation news and information. The importance of grassroots initiatives to advance understanding of general aviation, including business aviation, cannot be overstated. Increasingly, those efforts have centered not only on our industry's economic contributions or its role in providing critical lift to smaller communities. Sustainability and efforts to decarbonize the sector as a whole have also emerged as key themes in the larger conversation about the need to maintain a healthy and robust GA industry. To learn more about those efforts, I'm pleased to welcome today Bob Brock, Director of Aviation for the state of Kansas, along with Neil Ritchie, founder and senior advisor to the nonprofit research organization Main Street Project. Both men are also board members in the Alliance for Aviation Across America, a nonprofit, nonpartisan coalition of more than 6,300 individuals, businesses, airports and FBOs, elected officials, and others, all committed to raising awareness about the value of general aviation, particularly for rural communities. Neil, let me start with you. How does general aviation, and in particular efforts to enhance its sustainability, relate to Main Street Project's mission to create a more sustainable and resilient food system?
Rural America, rural economies are inextricably linked. The fact is that general aviation and the aviation infrastructure in particular is a critical part of how we manage to maintain and grow our rural economies. And so there's 5,000 airports, public use airports around the country. A whole lot of them don't have scheduled service, but they all play a role in supporting commerce, food production, agriculture in particular, all of the natural resource economies around the country, and companies, this small regional companies, large companies. For us, it's really about how do you maintain a viable general aviation industry. And people are starting to wake up to the fact that we sort of need all the elements of our economy functioning. And rural places in particular have to depend on each other. And this is just a huge piece of that connection. And so, the climate is getting more challenging. Everybody's going to play a role in shifting, decarbonizing sectors of the economy. I think the future demands it and depends on it. And so it's really great that general aviation is taking some initiative and some lead pushing into it because there's really no turning back.
Lots of good points there, especially how interconnected our world really is and how important those 5,000 public use airports are to supporting their communities. It's also worth considering how even a small reduction to emissions at each of those airports would quickly add up and have an enormous impact overall. Bob, more than 100 of those airports are in Kansas, along with a sizable aviation manufacturing presence. What are some of the sustainability initiatives in place in your state's aviation division?
Rob, this is kind of an exciting topic because the whole entire aircraft manufacturing industry this is one of the few things that so many strategic stakeholders are involved with together and are unified towards making things better for our country and for our entire environment. I really believe as we watch organizations like NBAA and the Alliance, Neil talked about earlier, the Alliance for Aviation Across America are heavily engaged in making the general aviation industry work. And here in Kansas, we have 138 public use airports, but that's a small part of a larger picture because the general aviation industry represents so much to our country. We actually nationwide have 1.2 million jobs that create $247 billion of economic impact. So here at our airports here in Kansas, we represent about $20 billion of that economic impact right here at our airports. So we work hard to incentivize the how of how we're doing that aviation. And a great deal of the funding that we put towards airport improvements is directly linked to economic development events, and things that increase public safety and flight safety have to be tied to those jobs and also to flight safety. So we really believe that the entire industry being oriented on the same flight path is a significant strategic enabler to making this possible. And some of these major partnerships are what's going to make it happen. The Kansas Airport Improvement Program sets aside by legislation a certain number of dollars every year. It's currently $5 million to do nothing but make sure that the general aviation airport system is effective, and it's moving very quickly to be relevant as one of our primary priorities. And we have a unique context. In the state of Kansas, 90% of the cities and towns in Kansas are less than 4,000 people. So that rural environment Neil talked about really emphasizes how significant it is to be able to reach those airports and reach those populations that are out in rural America. And, when NBAA and HAI and the rest of our strategic leaders in the industry talk about general aviation, they've actually done research that says that 85% of the businesses that use aviation are actually small to medium businesses. And so that represents a great big population. And so as we incentivize companies to come to Kansas, we talk to them about things like, do you use sustainable aviation fuel? And things like that. And that enters the conversation early so it can stay relevant for the long term.
Neil, it's important to note we're seeing these efforts to further the sustainability of our industry in every state.
Absolutely. The current state of people's awareness around sustainability has never been higher. And what we've seen recently with some of the supply chain disruptions is the challenge for the industry around fuel costs, and the need for more stability over the long haul is another part of what I think industry is keen on trying to manage. And I think policymakers are starting to become a little more sensitive to this. And so as long as the industry is thinking about and promoting ways to try and shift into more sustainable ways in the future, really this is about how businesses will not just survive, but how they can grow. And the issues around carbon-based fuels, of course, is just going to remain challenging on a global context when we have opportunities now to begin shifting to other kinds of feedstocks and other kinds of economic opportunities.
And we'll speak more about the move toward sustainable fuels in particular after this message from NBAA.
NBAA Flight Plan listeners, are you getting recognized for your leadership? NBAA now offers certificates and other credentials in safety, sustainability, and more. Visit nbaa.org to apply today.
We're back now with Neil Ritchie and Bob Brock, and our discussion about the growing importance of sustainability in efforts to promote general aviation, including business aviation, at the grassroots level. And Bob, before the break, Neil mentioned one of the most significant and promising efforts to reduce aviation carbon emissions, sustainable aviation fuel. How is Kansas helping to spread awareness and use of SAF, particularly in general aviation?
We're heavily engaged with the Business Aviation SAF Coalition, and that's a team of associations around the world, actually, that include, International Business Aviation Council and Commercial Alternative Aviation Fuels Initiative and others, to actually field SAF across the state in a meaningful way. Right at the very beginning of this initiative, senior leaders and thought leaders across the country were looking for places to actually begin fielding the fuel. So one of our fuel providers here in Kansas is AvFuel, and they're a global organization. But here in Salina, just before AirVenture 2021, when Ed Boland made the announcement from NBAA that he was proud to see that general aviation business jets were actually transitioning across the country and landing in Kansas to unload sustainable aviation fuel on the way to Oshkosh. And I think the implementation of that is such a powerful thing as we work with our own fuel providers here in the state and other states to, instead of revolutionizing the entire industry, stay relevant to the current technology and let it be usable immediately. I really respect the approach that our industry has used here in Kansas and elsewhere for blending 30% sustainable aviation fuel with 70% Jet A so that it's immediately drop-in capable and we can just begin using it. And yet it's still safe because it meets ASTM standards. And I think those kind of stair-step approach can revolutionize the industry and yet do it in very incremental and deliberate ways in each state and as we proliferate across other states that are doing the same things.
Neil, what are some of the ways the Alliance is working to promote sustainability?
The Alliance for Aviation Across America was founded specifically in 2007 to become a sort of an aggregate voice on behalf of the industry. And so the sustainability initiatives are the latest in the evolution of the work. And the Alliance itself now has somewhere north of 7,000 members, including a lot of non-aviation industries that are supporting it. So the shift is in keeping with what's current in the news and the topics. But I think the thing that the Alliance has been successful at is giving us all resources to make the case on behalf of the industry wherever we live. So there's economic studies for each of the states that talk about and show the economic impact of general aviation in each state, that have links to the local airports themselves and the data about them. That's been hugely helpful. Citizens giving local elected officials the tools to begin having more conversations with federal officials, with state level government that should be making investments in the industry. One of the things that they do is they help us all know what's going on around us. So there's been a lot of effort put into helping generate proclamations from cities and counties and states in support of the industry, things that begin to lift up and elevate the status of the industry and make people more aware of them. Sustainability, sustainable fuels, and just listening to the stories about refueling in Kansas on the way to Oshkosh, those are the kinds of things that are so important because we all live in our own bubbles. But this is a really critical role that the Alliance has been able to play with a pretty lean staff, and it's made all the difference in terms of the industry's ability to sort of gather itself and to be a force, both in Congress, where there's always going to be somebody pushing privatization or whatever. It's been remarkable. And of course, it's really timely now that we need to make a shift towards the sustainable fuels and new mobility situations.
I'd like to touch on comment Neil made about the conversations that occur at the board level of the Alliance for Aviation Across America are truly unique conversations because they really are reflecting multiple sectors of society more than a very narrow focus on a specific audience. And those kind of conversations that happen within the Alliance are directly connected to the conversations that we're having out in the community and the specific airports and across the government, legislators that represent our individual districts. Those conversations are about staying relevant to the industry and staying relevant to all of the full spectrum of audiences that make up the entire community and not just the special individual issues that affect only a small population. So I'm excited about the conversations that we have with our local government and that we see within the Alliance, because you really do get that cross-section of a lot of perspective that really is more representative of what America's looking for.
And speaking of those conversations, Bob, how can other aviation stakeholders help promote sustainability initiatives at the local or regional levels?
I think every one of us owe it to ourselves and to our communities to keep a clear eye towards progress in every single element of what we do at the airport. There's so much that we do that is out of habit or tradition or the momentum of what we've always done. But aviation's a far more creative and far more energetic industry than that. And the profession of aviation actually requires creativity. And so as we move some of these new innovations along, it's time to embrace the emerging technologies that we're all working towards collectively in things like the sustainability is a critical piece of this, but it's also going to empower things like advanced air mobility and workforce development and some of the new types of aircraft that are coming out that'll be fielded in every community across the country. So my encouragement to everyone is I believe each of us need to do a really disciplined job of paying attention to what the next steps could look like and band together with organizations like the Alliance and others to make that a possibility in America first and maybe foremost.
Neil, your thoughts?
I do think there's an opportunity. We're challenged at the moment. There is a lot of energy, as Bob said. And so keeping it collected in one place and engaging stakeholders with each other is going to be the key going forward. We still have plenty of challenges. There's going to be opportunities around workforce, and we're already short of workers in all manner of sectors. So on the one hand, having the industry be out there and connected to the rest of the economy and being thoughtful about the future is absolutely essential. Also, starting to think about where the industry is going to get its future workforce, irrespective of the others. There is also an element of self-interest here where we've got to figure out how are we going to attract young people and where's the training going to be housed and so on and so forth. So the excitement around sustainability, it could be a real important draw and a lever in the future. And everybody's going to have to step up.
Absolutely. Sustainability is so much more than just the environment. And what Neil talked about getting people from different sectors of society and sectors of industry and public service to not only continue to advocate for the things that they're already pushing for to support this great big transportation ecosystem that has ripple effects that are positive across the world, frankly. I really want to encourage us all to step out of our own shoes and go learn about that perspective from someone else so that we can be value added to the conversation. I think this greater conversation is starting to transform the direction that our country is going in a very positive way. And these conversations couldn't be more important and couldn't be more exciting to be a part of as we start to learn things like the organization that Neil is leading. I would have no understanding of that perspective if I wasn't serving on the board with the Alliance. And yet, there are so many other places that we can get information from that we really should be leveraging to make a big difference so that we really can stay current and relevant with the future industry.
To learn more about the Alliance for Aviation across America and about how groups like NBAA, Main Street Project, and many others are supporting their efforts to spread awareness of general aviation and its commitment to environmental stewardship, visit aviationacrossamerica.org. And of course, you can go to nbaa.org/environment for the latest information about efforts to reduce carbon emissions and lessen our industry's overall environmental impact. And that's the latest from the National Business Aviation Association. Remember, you can subscribe to all Flight Plan episodes at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcasts, including by asking your virtual assistant or connected device. Of course, you can also download Flight Plan directly from nbaa.org. I'm Rob Finfrock. Thanks for listening, and join us next time for a new episode of Flight Plan.